a bit weird. It shows like an iPad when you hold it like this. So basically, yeah, my name is Shermin. I'm the founder of the Blockchain Hub, based here in Berlin. We've been doing it not for such a long time. It generically happened. So what is the Blockchain Hub? What you see here is one part of what we do. The Blockchain Hub, the aim is to be an information hub, a people hub, and an idea hub, and obviously these three parts are linked to each other. Why did I start this kind of website? It's a Tumblr-based website. It was very curious for me when I started reading about the blockchain and I got interested and I got into it. And I started talking to my friends to it. Now my friends are not random people. Most of them are developers. Most of them are head of development, CTOs, head of product in some mostly Berlin-based, smaller, bigger startup. And they were saying like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, there's this blockchain hub. I want to do this think tank, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, block what? I'm like, blockchain. And they're like, never heard. I'm like, you know, Bitcoin, yeah, something. So I found myself in a weird situation that I do have a technology background, but I'm not like a hardcore developer. I had to explain to developers what blockchain is. So I think what we want to do basically is to advocate and communicate to the outside world, and obviously also to people who are close to technology, what blockchain is. And, but also in a way, especially when we're communicating, when we're trying to, I mean, we're building companies here and we're building products, and you've been, like, I really love the things that you're doing and Scribe in the morning, and but if we want people to adopt these technologies, we have to make them understand what it is. And especially if we're trying to say that blockchain is so cool because it's so safe and it's tamper-proof. So people have to believe that it's safe and it's tamper-proof. Because if they don't believe it, they won't be likely to early adopt it. You will always have some geeks and freaks and early adopters, but if you want the masses to start adopting it faster, we need to spread the word in a way that they understand it. Two examples. My grandmother told me that when she was a very small child, her father, back in Iran, had the first car in the neighborhood. So when her father came with a car, everybody was afraid because there was this thing driving and there were people in it and it didn't resemble a donkey or a horse. And it was doing these weird sounds. And people were scared to get near the car, they were scared to get into the car, needless to say, of being in the car while it was in motion. Of course, over time, more and more people started having cars and people started trusting this thing with that combustion engine in it without really knowing how it worked, because over time, of course, there was trust based on experience that it's more or less safe. Maybe an example that is closer to what we're dealing with today. In 2009, back in Vienna, I was producing this documentary series on democracy. And in 2009, there was a group of people in Austria who were trying to advocate or trying to introduce electronic voting in Austria. And they really had the aim, like Austria is one of the first countries to have e-voting. The use case or the proof of concept should be the, back in 2009, student council elections. They prepared everything, they got government funding, there was a project management team. 1 month before the elections, that whole thing got called off for political reasons, because the people were afraid that they couldn't trust this electronic system. And I remember being at the University of Vienna, and there 5 people were on the podium. One was the guy who was advocating e-democracy, and he was actually the project manager of that test project. 4 people were skeptical and they were against it. The guy advocating it had an IT background. The people who were skeptical had social sciences backgrounds. And the guy advocating it kept saying public key, private key, public key, private key, like mantra, like hoping that they would understand that because of these 2 terms he was using, they would trust it. But obviously they did not understand public and private key. And they kept pulling out the paper and saying, when we take the ballot box and we take this paper out, we understand that this is an X here or an X here, and we can check it, and with technology we can't. So I think I don't need to explain more. Up to today, we haven't had any electronic voting in Austria, even though the infrastructure exists, and most of us here know that it can be secure. And so this is why this is very important. As a People Hub, what we're doing is like, and of course this intersects, for example, on Monday, the director of the European Forum Altbach is coming to Berlin. We're having a sit-down with a small group of people. The European Forum Altbach is like a 3-week political and economic forum in the Alps in Austria. It's interdisciplinary. This year the theme was inequality. Next year is going to be Enlightenment 4.0. The director is going to come. We're going to sit down with Gavin, as he's gone from Ethereum. A handful of people with from Room 77, Masha from Ascribe. The idea is to tell him, or just to lobby a little bit the idea of the blockchain, and to have blockchain applications, projects in the forum next year. And this is actually the reason why I started the whole thing, the Idea Hub. And when I'm talking about this kind of think tank, I'm trying to go a bit beyond of the things that have been presented today, the applications and the layers that we need to make this happen. My question that I would like to ask is, how is this going to enable us to transform our society on a global level? Because if we look where we are today, political scientists have been using this word a lot lately. We live in a time of post-democracy. Of course, I'm talking about countries like Germany. I'm not talking about Yemen or so. We're living in a time of post-democracy, which basically means that, yes, to the outside we have this shell of democracy, but to the inside, most citizens feel that what they vote for is not what is happening. Or that what they would like to happen is not really happening. And why is that so? And I think that's very important in the context of the blockchain. We have two reasons, two main reasons, of course, for many reasons. A, we have a constitutional bug. B, we have the dissolving of the nation states. And I would like to focus on the constitutional bug. What do I mean by that? What are the fundamentals of democracy? What do we need for democracy to work? Different things, for example. Anyone?
Participation.
Participation, in what form?
Sorry?
In what form?
For everybody.
Okay.
Free speech.
Free speech, freedoms, we need the freedoms.
Citizenship.
Citizenship, okay.
Supposed to be informed citizens.
Yeah, informed citizens. Voting, maybe? Okay. Okay, yeah, one form of participation. What else? Something really, really fundamental.
Well,
Quality of influence.
Equality, yes. Of influence.
Well, at the base level, so one person, one vote.
One person, one vote, yes. This is like participation. One form would be voting, and the fair form of voting would be one person, one vote.
A legislative process?
A legislative process. We need many things, as we can hear now. One of the fundamentals that we need is a system of checks and balances. This system of checks and balances in German, because it's different, it's separation of powers, Gewaltenteilung, is one of the fundamental pillars of democracy. Our system of checks and balances of our modern democracies, and I'm referring to the democracies since the French revolutions. Our system of checks and balances is based on the idea of the separation of three powers: the legislative power, the executive power, and the judiciary. These ideas were developed by two guys back in the 15th and 16th century getting back to what you were saying, 15th and 16th century, Montesquieu and John Locke, they were living in Europe or different European countries with absolute monarchies. Back then, there was no mass media. Back then, there was no such thing as a private corporate organization that was doing independent from the government doing business. Private business entities did basically not exist. All political and economic power was in the hand of one person. Now, when our modern democracies evolved in the 18th century, they based on the idea of the separation of powers developed 200 years prior. By that time, the printing press in the 16th century was only just a new technology, and of course we didn't have the private organizations. Fast forward, end of the 19th century, we have these young democracies in Europe and in America, for example, and all of a sudden, one of our freedoms, which was basically also, we didn't only get the freedom to vote and the freedom of speech, but also the freedom of economic activity. With this freedom of economic activity came the fact that people were opening their own businesses. That was at the same time that we had industrialization, and all of a sudden, at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, we found ourselves in a situation where we had these new big companies which had economic power that was unaccounted for. And that was the time when there was this debate between communism and capitalism. Because why? And why did we have this debate for over the whole scope of the 20th century? Because that's a constitutional bug of our modern democracy. We have not solved this issue because our democracies are based on ideas that were developed in the 16th century when we didn't have those issues yet. Why am I saying this? In the context of the blockchain. For two reasons. I believe that when we today decide what the algorithms should be, we should keep in mind exactly this. Otherwise, we will see what is happening with Bitcoin now, and we will find ourselves in a situation where people are trapped in, trapped in systems, in blockchains, where there are network effects, so whatever Gavin says, obviously there are network effects, and it's not so easy to leave the system. So we have to be very careful how we define our constitutions. It needs to be flexible enough because today we don't know how the world looks in 10 years, so we can't make a constitution that is based on a very inflexible, that cannot be changed. And so that is one of the reasons. The second reason why I'm talking about democracy is because I think my vision of the future, the nation state is obsolete. We currently have big companies who are operating outside national laws. They are not big corporations who are not complying to national taxes. They're not paying taxes. They're not complying with environmental laws. They're not complying with workers' rights laws because they're fleeing into another state. And I think in the future, this will be our future. Democracy can only work in decentralized ways, and we will be citizens, but most likely we won't be citizens of Germany or Austria. We will be citizens of different blockchains, and I think we will be citizens of parallel blockchains. So, yeah. The think tank that we created, the idea is to gather heads of the interdisciplinary people, bring the techies together with the philosophers, bring the historians together with the business people, and really try to find solutions that are fit for the future. And yeah, so if any of you is interested contributing to information, people, or ideas, please contact me. I don't know, I'm not developing but any questions?
How to get in touch?
Yeah.
How do we?
Yeah, on the website